This podcast is brought to you by TrueVoice. We're bringing you automated win, loss, and no decision analysis at scale so you can find and fix seller blind spots in near real time. With automated customer feedback from every opportunity, you'll uncover what buyers truly care about when purchasing, what your competitors are doing to adapt, and how the experience with your sales reps impact win rates. With this new insight, your sellers automatically receive the right science-backed sales training from Corporate Visions based on their individual strengths and weaknesses. It's time to get more from your win-loss analysis. TrueVoice moves you from just-in-case to just-in-time coaching and training. Visit us at www.truevoice.io and start winning more today.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining me for another edition of Sales Intelligence Weekly, brought to you by TrueVoice. I'm your host, Ryan Queller. In today's dynamic business landscape, the focus on sales enablement for B2B organizations hasn't just become increasingly vital, it has become critical. Whether you're already equipped with a dedicated enablement team or considering enablement initiatives within your company, or understanding or trying to understand the evolving nature of enablement or strategic best practices and securing executive buy-in, all of this it's crucial. We have reached a critical level. Sales enablement is a must. The great news is today somebody flew in from Florida with a suitcase to help me unpack this issue. Sorry, Chris, that was a terrible analogy, but whatever. Unpacking this with me today is a special guest, Chris Kingman, the global head of digital sales enablement at TransUnion. Together, we're going to dive into the world of sales enablement, exploring its transformative journey, how to kickstart your own enablement function, and the pivotal role it plays in driving growth. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ryan. Very excited to be here.
All right, my friend, before we hop into the conversation, let's tell us about you. Tell us about your experience. Who is this Chris Kingman?
Sure. I've been in enablement for over 13 years at this point. I had a very brief stint in on-premise wine and spirit sales right out of college. It kind of set the tone for me in sales because I failed miserably. Fast forward to about 5 years after that, I ended up at a tech startup. And if you know anybody that's been in a startup, they're hired for one thing, they end up doing 5 other things. And one of those things for me was building out a training and development function, and just snowballed from there. And I really built out a lot of the disciplines under enablement, whether it's support, customer training, internal training, onboarding, operations, reporting, you name it, process improvements. I really kind of cut my teeth in this tech startup. And then eventually that was acquired by TransUnion, and I integrated into the larger corporate environment and kind of been growing ever since. And along that path, very fortunate enough to be involved with Sales Enablement Society, both founding it, doing a lot of the work in the early years, as well as recently joining the board of directors there, and helping contribute and give back to the practice.
So you mentioned the Sales Enablement Society, and I was doing a little not trolling, that's the wrong word. Exploring, looking into, getting to know you a little bit online before our call, before our podcast. And it turns out the Illuminati got together in Tyson's Corner, Virginia, to start the Sales Enablement Society some years ago, and it's just exploded into this gigantic thing. I mean, were you part of this?
I was not part of the original group in Virginia. I didn't. Those were a small LinkedIn group meeting that came together, but the very first official meeting they held in Palm Beach. So lucky for me, I was 30 minutes away, but I was there to help finalize a lot of the work around the charter, sign the mission statement, put my stamp on there as a founding member, and kind of put my name in the room, my voice in the room there. Lots of funny stories and relationships built just from that moment as well. Being, at that time, I was the only millennial in a room of about 400 practitioners. So they seized up on that one pretty quick. But it was a great experience. I've made a lot of great relationships. I've had a lot of great mentors, especially earlier in my career. I met a lot of very, very intelligent people all they wanted to do was give back. And so if you're in enablement, or if you're considering it, or if you don't, but you just want to level up, I highly suggest everybody just, takes 2 seconds, Googles that Sales Enablement Society. And it's free to join, but it's endless amounts of value.
So fantastic. Thank you for coming. Let's get into this. You already mentioned something that's going to lead us right into this. You've been doing this for some time, a little over a decade and a half. Let's start with your perspective. And you already gave a little teaser, but how have you seen sales enablement kind of evolve? Let's use the word evolve over the last, say, 5-10 years.
Sure. So I really think, a lot of folks kind of, as that term sort of entered into the fray, right? They were doing some version of it. You'll probably hear a lot of people say it was operations, right? They were doing the reporting, they were doing the training. Some more technologically advanced groups maybe were doing content management, or maybe they were administering Salesforce, or maybe even some of the sales tech tools that were around a decade ago, the very few at that time. But I think they all kind of gravitated under this one umbrella term of we're anything and everything that drives revenue and drives sales productivity. And I think that was kind of the course for, say, the first 5-6 years was it's sales enablement. We're enabling sellers, across almost anything. But inevitably, as that got bigger and broader, I think a lot of people realized real quick, you could have the most efficient and effective sales organization, but if you don't have good operations, you don't have good membership, you don't have good delivery, you don't have good client success, it really impacts the sale and impacts the revenue, whether it's revenue capture or whether it's revenue renewal. And so some of the folks in maybe larger organizations are the ones that were thinking forward, were pivoting to, all right, well, we enabled the sales force, but how do we enable the operations organization? How do we enable the delivery organization? How do we enable IT? How do we get everybody in the room orientated the right direction towards revenue? And I think that's kind of what you're seeing now. You got to love your buzzwords, right? Everything is enablement now. Absolutely everything. And here comes revenue enablement, which also has been called a dozen other things over the last, 20, 30 years. But it's at least getting the attention it deserves, where people are, maybe they missed the sales enablement boat, but now they see, oh, there are dedicated functions at organizations that bring everyone together to orchestrate the pursuit of revenue. And I think that's really where we are today. Is there, is there a playbook? Is there a concrete way to do it? No, everybody's got their own version. And that's totally okay. But I think it collectively as a practice, as an organization, or excuse me, as a trade or a craft, it's moving in that direction of think bigger than sales.
So what I heard you say, I'm going to boil down a lot of what you just said into kind of this singular spot. And there's this idea of alignment. That for me, being a chief delivery officer at TrueVoice, alignment is 100% on my mind 100% of the time. It's not the only thing I think about, but it is constantly looking. I'm always looking for ways to do this. Why is that alignment from a sales enablement perspective? Why is that an alignment so imperative? And why have we landed here after all these years?
So forgive me for not knowing who said this, but one of my favorite quotes as it relates to business is sales isn't the whole company, but the whole company better be sales. I think, and maybe you can give me your 2 cents, but buying or sales doesn't end at the purchase or the contract signature, right? There's so much more to it. And if you look at a lot of the data and a lot of the research that's sort of come out over the last, couple of years, it's really honing in on a couple different things, right? The best product isn't really prevailing all the time.
Ooh.
Not everything sells itself. The iPhone's a great example. It's oh, it's an iPhone, I have to have it. But 15 years ago, some people were like, okay, I don't see the value, I don't see the benefit. People are buying from people, right? That's not new. But really, what I think is kind of pushing this forward and what we're seeing is that Customers want to buy from people that understand them and that treat them properly and take care of them. And you may have a great salesperson that can articulate things and really understand the customer, but if the ongoing support of that relationship is poor, they're probably going to leave you, right? And then it'll be as easy as, just we're not getting the attention that we need, or we're not getting the support, or even worse, is like they were sold a bill of goods and they're really kind of getting something else. And so if you really want to pull all of this stuff together to ensure what you're selling is actually what you're able to deliver. And I'm sure you can speak to this before a lot, some sellers will sell you some stuff that probably you don't offer or can't offer.
What, Chris? You're crazy, man. I've never experienced that here.
Yeah, it's a small amount of them. It's a small amount. But you want to bridge that gap, right? You want a consistent experience. You think of like the companies that you keep going back to, or like who you rent from, or purchase products or whatever. Like I think of U-Haul and like renting their trucks. Like if you've ever rented a moving truck, you can do it from your phone. It's quick, it's seamless. Like it's the same consistent experience every time. If you look at Home Depot, you go to a Home Depot, they're pretty much all the same on the inside. They carry all the same products for the most part, but it's the level of support you get after the fact. You ever have a problem, you can go to their website from your phone, and then you can push a button and talk to somebody via text message. And it is an AI bot, but it will literally solve 90% of your problems. Clearly, I'm not handy, so I break a lot of stuff. I got to keep going back and forth to Home Depot, so I know about it. But that's the level, like I'm sure it's super polarizing. Either you're a Home Depot person or a Lowe's person.
A Lowe's person, right?
Yeah. So that's one of the reasons why I'm a Home Depot person. That level of support. And it's, how much money do you think I'm spending at Home Depot? Not as much as contractors, not as much as people building homes, but I still get this immaculate level of support. And that means a lot as a customer, right? I know I'm never going to buy a massive purchase, but if I ever had to buy a refrigerator, or I wanted to redo a kitchen, I would probably look to them first.
Okay. So I love that. And it seems like there's been this evolution kind of over time as well, in addition to pulling all this alignment, but the evolution points towards the improvement of support for the buyer, for the customer. And really, there's been additional evolution around, it used to be, sell, sell, sell. And now it's kind of help, 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 support, support, support. I mean, buyers are buying. They're looking for a buying experience, a selling experience that is supportive of their endeavor, not of the feature functionality crap that we have to push at them, but really what's going to help them make a decision to buy. I mean, are you seeing the same thing?
Oh, yeah, I totally agree. And, before this podcast, we were talking about, I went to a conference, and they provided the latest stat on the number of buyers in a buyer group, right? And I think from a sales perspective and an enablement perspective, that's always one of the most fascinating statistics. And they said it's now up to 20 buyers. 20 people have to make a decision. Like, you imagine trying to figure out how to go, where do you want to go for lunch for 20 people? Like, now try to do an enterprise-wide purchase. Much more complicated, a lot more online. And so I think buying, you had a great example. Buying is moving towards, it's not selling people something, it's driving understanding and alignment. And, let's say we've got 10 buyers. That's 10 versions of one problem, right? It's how you see it, and then it's how I see it, and then it's how somebody else sees it. And those 10 versions have 10 root causes. They have 10 side effects. They have 10 outcomes. And then most important is Ryan makes a decision. What are the consequences of Ryan making that decision? What are the consequences of Chris making it? And then the next buyer, and the next buyer. And sales is becoming so complicated because of that, right? And because there's too many buyers, or perhaps it is the right amount of buyers. There's too many versions of the problem. There's too many complications or side effects of the problem. There's too many outcomes, right? And then there's too many consequences of making a decision. Because, if you make a decision, if we all go to lunch and Ryan picks a restaurant and it's terrible, well, you know what? We're out of we're out $20 in a bad meal. But if you make a $500,000 enterprise purchase, the stakes are a little bit higher. And, that's why you get no as the buying decision consistently. And I think modern sales is a reaction to the most consistent decision being a no decision.
Wow. Drop the mic, walk off. That is a soundbite, and absolutely agree 100%. So let's take the next step here in this conversation for our listeners, where maybe they're one of those organizations that don't have a dedicated sales enablement function. Okay. There might even be some overlap between product marketing and sales enablement. If you don't have a dedicated sales enablement role, how does one actually get started?
That's a great question. So let's carve out the budget conversation, right? Because that's the hang up, and that's the hardest part of it. For those out there that don't have dedicated resources, you can go through an internal exercise to kind of determine capacity and working capacity, right? Like how many people within an operations/marketing, maybe it's a sales manager or an executive sales leader, somebody has bandwidth for something, right? It's going to be very subjective. How much time can you spend on, an objective? Can you put 2 hours a week into something that will improve your business? If you're some level of, seniority, you could probably find somebody who either A, has the time, or B, is willing to stretch, right? Really stretch their skills. Or C, as I've heard from a lot of enablement people, like, I wanted to make things better for my organization, or my manager, my leader was always leaning on me to help with training or this or that. You're going to find someone, right? Just do a hand raising exercise. So you find somebody, you got a body in a chair that can give you an hour, 2 hours a week. It depends. And the amount of time will come out of this exercise. The next thing you'll do is you can Google any kind of, diagnostic. You can look up a sales diagnostic. You can look up, determining sales enablement priorities. All of that stuff out there. There's a lot of great resources, but you can just do this. Talk to executive leadership, talk to the front line, talk to the supporting teams. What's working and what's not. Now, it's all subjective data, right? It's just it's Ryan's opinion. Ryan says marketing's not talking to sales. Thank you, Ryan. Go to the next person. Somebody else says the same thing. Somebody else says something different. You look for recurring themes, not even like hard data, just recurring themes. And you go down those paths and you consolidate the anecdotes to anecdata, the subjective to arguably qualitative, and you kind of come up with some key themes. This isn't working, this isn't working, this isn't working. The next step, figure out what needs to fix it. Again, go to the managers, go to the front line, go to support. Here's the problems. What could fix it? The people in the problem usually have a solution. They may not be the ones to get you out of the problem because maybe they got you there, but they might have an idea of the way out. Once you have a set of solutions, this is where you get the budget. The first thing is you have to go fix it, right? It's not the other way around. Get the money, go fix it. It's like, go fix it, and then we'll pay you to do it again with something else. Figure out how much time and energy it needs to fix something. Marketing and sales relationship isn't good. Great. What is that going to take? That's probably 2 meetings a week to align, to make sure everybody's on the same page. We need this, they need that. Done. Figure out some way to calculate that value of fixing that. And that's going to be tough because sometimes you have benchmarks. We have hard data about the impacts of a challenge. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes you just need a baseline performance. Right now, they're doing X, Y, Z. We think if we resolve this, we can be here. Don't ask for budget until you can prove the impacts. I think that's one of the easier ways to get enablement done, right? You got to put in the sweat equity first, which some people might not be able to do. But if you prove the value before you ask for the money, it's a little bit of an easier budget conversation.
Okay. So that's some phenomenal advice, especially for somebody, one of our listeners or our listeners that are looking to establish but don't know where to start. find the issue, find the themes, prove a result, then take those results and the issues back, ask for budget. Am I tracking? Did I nutshell that appropriately?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
And then, wash, rinse, repeat.
Watch this. So you really, what you did was you answered the question, how do we actually drive appetite for this in a macroeconomic environment where belts are actually being tightened? So what you did was you've already got the solution, you've got the results, budget, right? So that becomes a very easy business decision. That's brilliant.
Yeah, I don't get me wrong. There is endless amounts of research and data from every consulting firm and large scale publication that says this is why you need this.
Yeah.
And they're not wrong 100%. And you should cite that stuff when you are going back, but nothing's going to sell like the real world impacts that are exactly related to your business. Because if I said, hey, Ryan, I can improve lead conversion by 25% with your business by coming over there and giving you some sales enablement, it's kind of hard to connect that from a sales perspective, because it's like, well, you don't know my business. You don't know what's going on here. You don't know all these folks. You don't know the context, the history, what we've tried. But if you are internal facing and you are solving your company's problems, and you're changing the course, you're changing the direction, no matter how slow, it's going to tell a way better story and people are going to see the results. There's like, for me, I've had the biggest sort of, progress in my career by going and solving the problems first, and then going back and saying, we just solved this problem. We can continue to solve this problem, but here's how much it's going to cost. Here's how much you're going to get out.
So we have a shared experience. Absolutely. Bringing a result to the table, not just an idea, it's a difference maker. So from your perspective, what are some of the challenges that someone might face when they're trying to put in that sweat equity, right? What are some of the challenges they might, and how do we overcome them?
So I think the first one's going to be time, right? It's how much time is this going to take? And that's very fair. And in all realities, people that want to make things better may not actually have the bandwidth to do it. And that's okay, right? I'm a big proponent of start where you are with what you have and do what you can. If you can only do an hour a week, and maybe that hour is, your lunch on a Thursday, but you're doing something, that's a heck of a lot better than doing nothing and letting the problem, take care of itself. There's another way to look at it is, let's say you can have some bandwidth, you can get a group of folks together to have some conversations. There's two ways to look at it. And if you go back to sort of those diagnostic conversations that I outlined earlier, you can always kind of look at a weighting system. You come up with your own, but I like to look at it two ways. One, how proficient are we at this particular thing right now, right? Like, how good are we at this? Let's say marketing and sales alignment, you're a 3. It's okay, but it could be better. The second metric is, how important is it that we get this right? 1, doesn't matter. Business is going to, do what it does. If we don't do this, or we do. 5, if we mess this up, we're in trouble. Use those two numbers, come up with a score, and rank your thing. The other component of that is, how much time will it take to improve what you're looking at, right? You want to you don't have a CRM. That's like a year and a half implementation, depending on how big you are. You need to improve relationships with marketing. That's maybe 3 months of meetings and getting together in a room and talking, right? Look at it in two different ways. What are the quick wins? What are the things we can do real quick that improve the lives, the interactions, the flow, the energy of the sales organization and the broader organization? Maybe that's just getting people in a room, connecting engineers with sellers, or you name it, right? Simple things. And only you will know what that looks like in your organization. And then what are the long-term strategic wins? The big bang. What's the massive thing that's going to make, move the needle? And those are probably the ones that are going to require the budget. Focus on the quick wins. Make quick improvements, improve quality here and there. Make sure you're talking to your teams, your sellers, your leaders, so they know what you're doing. and capture the anecdotes that lead to the anecdata that can tell the stories of, we solve these 5 problems. Here's what happened. Morale through the roof, conversions through the roof, 190% plant, whatever happens.
So you mentioned results at the business level. I want to zoom into the human. So talk about the person that is undertaking this lift, right? They see the problem, they go out and they start to invest that sweat equity, to create those solutions, to drive business case that you can take back. What is the impact for the human, the person? Maybe it's a PMM, maybe it's somebody else, maybe it's a totally different function, whatever. What is the impact for the person that undertakes this internally with an organization that maybe doesn't have sales enablement already in place?
I think at a minimum, if you set out to improve things, right? I think let's say you're semi-successul, because no enabler is just 10 for 10. Everything they do is a hit, knocks it out of the park, right? You're going to fail at a lot of stuff, and that's okay. At a minimum, you're going to get a confidence boost about your own capabilities, right? If you go back to find the bandwidth, maybe stretch your time, take on something else, you're going to be impressed with what you can do and what you can accomplish. I think you're going to see, and this is for me, this is always my driving component behind enablement, is you're going to improve people's lives, right? I mentioned I had a very brief career in wine and spirits, and it was a terrible sales experience. I got no support, no CRM. My orders were always messed up. Everybody's always yelling at me. So I know what it's like to fail in sales. And so I bring that with me forever in enablement. And so when I work with folks, it's, I think I have a pretty soft approach in that. It's like, just tell me what sucks so I can help make it better. I think for me, it's always, you're going to be successful in enablement if you focus on helping people actually achieve their goals. That's where the success comes from.
Man, so that's okay. We're going to pontificate a little bit. We're going to do this. We're going to wax. If you focus on helping people, you're not just going to be successful in sales enablement. You're going to be successful at life. I mean, that is, for me, what you just said is a paradigm that drives value of life. And so that is such valuable depth of insight, Chris. Thank you for this. And it doesn't just apply to our listeners, doesn't apply just to sales enablement. That is a good human play, right? If you want to be a good human, help other people, focus on solving problems, not just surfacing them, but helping solve them, helping improve, be part of that solution. Valuable, Chris. Man, you just made my day. Thank you for that. So we need to go steps further. So we've talked about some of the obstacles, how to overcome them, what to focus on, sweat equity. There is a thing, especially for organizations that may not have sales enablement function already in place. There might be a reason for that, and part of that reason might have to do with paradigm of the organization, right? So we're a product organization, we're product-led organization, and we believe that all problems that are created that our customers might have can be and should be solved within the product. And there's this focus on product and less on the sales aspect. I'm curious to know your thoughts. What impact does culture have on kind of sales enablement and the efficacy with which sales enablement can be kind of run?
Well, products aren't people, I think. It's a great question, Ryan. I think enablement is both a reaction and a catalyst to culture.
Ooh, let's unpack that. Yeah, let's go.
So you can be in a organization, and I was in one that was very product centric, very, it was all about the tech, and sales was more or less like a necessary component. And that's fine. And it just made sales a marginalized group, but there's still a group, and it's still a group of people. And so you can start there, bringing together anything and everything. One of the most powerful sales enablement tools is just listening. It's overrated or it's cliche. I'm not sure where people fall on that, but like sales is hard. Sales is really, really hard. It's not fun. I don't know. I don't enjoy it. And so these people have very hard jobs. So maybe they need an outlet when things don't necessarily work, or they could be better. And then what better place, and not to sound opportunistic, but like who better to step in and hear that than an enablement person, right? And again, even if that 10% of your time is listening to salespeople talk about what doesn't work and what could be better, there's a huge benefit in letting people vent and a huge benefit in letting them talk. And you're going to get a lot of information that is super critical to solving your organization's problems. Like I made the analogy referencing the iPhone. The iPhone's great, but at one time, someone still had to sell it. Someone still had to sell you on this idea that this phone can replace 90 things in your like the old Radio Shack ad. It can replace all of these things. Some people didn't buy that, and that's okay, right? So at some point, you are going to need some person to explain the value of your tool. No, nothing. I think the only thing that sells itself 100% of the time is water. So you need salespeople, and it may be a small group in your organization, maybe one or two people. Your CEO may be selling. I don't know, but that just means that unless that group is at like 125% of plan and they're crushing it and they're undefeated, there's probably an opportunity to improve how they operate. And even small progress in improvements in how they do their jobs and the quality of their job, the quality of the life at work, is going to lead to a better culture. And for me, that's really where I started, was just helping this group out, helping sales out in the tech startup, and building a reputation of somebody that's going to go find out how to solve a problem. Again, probably didn't get it right most of the time, but I solved enough of them to where people trusted me to say, hey, I got this problem. Can you come take a look at it? And that builds your culture. People join your organization 2, 3, 4 years after kind of, you transform it. And your sellers, your support teams are going to say, like, look, if you got a problem, we've got teams, we got people, they will take care of it. And I got to imagine it's a great feeling. It's a great thing to go work somewhere and be like, hey, we don't get it right all the time. We got a great product, but you still got to sell it. And if you get stuck, we got people that are going to help you out.
Love that. Okay. So earlier you mentioned about when we were talking about the evolution of sales enablement over the last 5-10 years, one of the things that you mentioned was how things are called and what things are called. And one of the things you mentioned was about this idea to revenue enablement. So as we've shifted to, and we're shifting to, and more terms are coming up like revenue enablement, from your perspective, how do you see this, this evolution of how things are being categorized like revenue enablement? How do you see this evolution impacting enablement in general?
I think it's good. I think it's attention. It may not be exactly pointed at what is sales enablement, right? But I think the kind of the commentary that maybe you're hearing in like the social spheres is like, revenue enablement is the new sales enablement. Maybe that's enough for people. Well, hold on, what is sales enablement, and why did it evolve to this? And maybe it leads folks into looking into it. While that does sound like a very valuable add to a business, do they need to necessarily go down the rabbit hole of, well, sales enablement is really a combination of sales ops and training, and all of these things? You don't need the full context to understand the value. So I think it's going to draw attention to the practice, depending on the organization, depending on the size, depending on the maturity, and depending on who's really like looking at it for their business. They may need sales enablement. They may need to start there, and they may have the ambitions to evolve to revenue enablement, right? I really just think it's a crawl, walk, run scenario. And maybe for a lot of folks, sales enablement is that walk.
So how do we prioritize? So I'm in my organization. I've identified the need. I'm ready to start doing that sweat equity investment. Maybe I've even done the sweat equity investment, whatever. How do we start to prioritize what's going to be impactful? Maybe that's even the answer. I don't know. But how do we prioritize where to start and how to start?
Sure. So I think enablement kind of works. It's very similar to sales in that you have inbound and outbound, right? People are going to come tell you like, hey, I need you to do this. And that's great. Like it may be for one person or it may be a larger challenge aligned to a team or an organization. It's up to you to sort of figure out where that fits, right? I think there's also the outbound component. Go find out, like go ask. The easiest way to ask is start with the goals. It's always the goals, and it's always go to the highest ranking salesperson, get their time, and say, hey, can you help me understand your goals? Because I want to reverse engineer this and see what's keeping you from hitting these goals. What goal is, which goal is most in danger? Which goal is most important that you hit? What contributes to that goal? What's preventing you from hitting it, or what could ensure that you get to it? I'm a big fan of whenever you go set out to do an initiative, no matter how big or small, go talk to your internal stakeholders and your customers and ask them, what does success look like to you? Because that's the real metric you're going to be measured on. Are the people footing the bill believing you're successful or not? Right? They're going to fund it because it's based on assumptions, or they're going to allow you to work on it based on assumptions. You need to understand those assumptions because you need to get as close to those as possible, even if they aren't necessarily completely in line with the reality of the situation. We know some more senior folks may be a little disconnected from problems or solutions, and that's okay. Tie them all together. Look at what's the story. How do how do you prioritize? Well, what's a priority? What's a priority for my sales leader? The next layer down, the next layer down. Go talk to your front line. Hey guys, what's a priority? What's keeping you from hitting goal? What's keeping you from being efficient? What's keeping you from getting on the phone or doing whatever it is your specific sales org required? There's no shortage of priorities, which is also a problem. Everything's a priority, nothing's a priority.
Right.
Always point it back to the goals. Because the closer you can get to the goals, there's always revenue tied to one of those, easier it is to then say, great, we'll help you hit that goal, fund us, we'll continue to help you hit that goal.
So Chris, if you could leave our listeners with, and you've given already just a ton to chew on to start with, but if you had one piece of advice to leave our listeners, what would it be?
So I'm going to go back to a comment that you brought up earlier. For me, enablement is about people. It's always about people. It's always about the people. No matter how big and strategic an enablement initiative is, it always boils down to it's going to impact people. These people are in your care. So never lose sight of the fact that the purpose that you exist. Yes, you have revenue goals. Your organization is shareholders, maybe, or publicly traded, you got to hit a number. Everything rolls back down to people. It's people doing jobs, and your job is to support and enable those people doing the jobs, right? That's where you fit in the big machine. And if you can always keep at your core that this is a people-centered job, I'm here in a service role and support role, an enablement role, however you want to envision yourself or carry yourself, you're there to care for people.
That's awesome. I love that advice. That is so valuable, man. So coming back full circle, tying it back into people. You said at the beginning of the show, I think it was at the beginning of the show, that the best product does not always prevail, right? I think that's how you put it. And if it's not the best product, it's then the people that help drive vision and alignment and help the buyer buy something, the product that can actually help solve the problem, but it's not always just product feature functionality. It's the person helping set paradigm. People. Dude, that was awesome. Chris, thank you so much for being on the show today. This was valuable. We might need to do a part 2 if you're game, but brother, thank you for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Ryan. Really appreciate it.
And listeners, for more from our friends at TransUnion and from us here at True Voice from Corporate Visions, formerly Primary Intelligence, check out the show notes at www.primary-intel.com/podcast. And remember, no deal is out of reach. We'll see you next time.